Hi, friends. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Path for Health podcast. And today I'm going to be talking about anxiety and depression and how it correlates or works together with your gut and your gut-brain axis, and also the four most common triggers and what you can do about it. Hi, thank you for joining me on the Path for Health podcast. My name is Brandy Lloyd, and I will be your host. I am a functional nutritional therapy practitioner and personal trainer. I've had a long career as a personal trainer, but about 10 years ago, my health status began to unravel. I eventually was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called spondyloarthropathy. This is an inflammatory arthritis that affects nearly every joint in my body, including my spine. After a long road of discovering food allergies, incorporating stress management techniques, focusing on time on gut healing and hormone balance, I have finally found the restoration for my health. At this time, I am prescription-free and hope to remain that way, but I'm open and grateful for whatever lies ahead. Most of my time is now spent helping people just like me, people who are trying to find answers to improve their health through diet and lifestyle changes. This podcast is for educational purposes. Please consult your doctor before making any changes based on what you learn here. My goal is to educate and inspire you. So please don't forget to leave a comment and share this podcast with your own circle of people. And I hope you reach out to me too. I have many different types of educational platforms and support. Now let's get on with the show. Hi friends, thank you so much for joining me on the Path for Health. Today, I thought that I would talk about a really important and instant in your life issue that you're dealing with, which is basically the impact of your gut health and your overall mental and physical health. We are stressed out right now with all of the current changes around the world, the self-quarantining or lockdowns, the loss or even just alteration of financial and social situations that all of us are experiencing. I figured this was something really important that we need to talk about today. These are unprecedented times for many of us. The last pandemic of this caliber to affect us was in 1918, and life is almost unrecognizable today as it was compared to 1918. I'm pretty sure that most of us wouldn't even know how to begin living a normal day in 1918. And I'm not just referring to medical care. I mean, everything is different. Most of us wouldn't make it a week if we were suddenly teleported back to 1918. I mean, the reliance of toilet paper is a perfect example of that. For thousands of years, people have used cloths to clean themselves, and now we are facing this total toilet paper epidemic along with everything else. I know that for us and our family, we just happened to go by Costco in the beginning of March, and we just happened to buy a boatload of toilet paper, and so we are not in the panic zone. We also have a house full of boys. I'm the only girl here, so, the boys use less toilet paper, but we do have more people home. But I do have thoughts of conservation. We bought Charmin toilet paper, and I told my husband recently, I said, hey, you know what? This is a time to conserve. I realize that I myself am only using 2 squares instead of just grabbing just whatever off of there. We're just thrown into this different mindset as something as simple as toilet paper can really rock our world. So I, like myself, am witnessing a not so surprising picture of just how reliant people have become on not just things like toilet paper, but also eating out as well. And sure, the restaurants are closed in most areas. I know they are in my area and for most of the country and in a lot of places around the world. But people have turned to their own comforting processed foods found in the grocery store instead of reaching for healthy foods. We're just trying to find ways to make this work. And that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to find a way to make this work. So you might hear a dog barking or something going on, and I apologize for that. But I'm just trying to really get this information out to you, and I'm doing it in a little different environment than I have in the past. So back to that nutrition and eating out and comfort foods and processed foods and people just buying based on shelf stability. How long is this going to last? How cheap is it? I totally get it. We don't know where this pandemic is going to take us, but I'm a firm believer that we are living in a time of great wealth. And as long as we share, then there is more than enough to go around for everybody else. So there's really no sense to hoard at this point. Now, I've been shouting from the rooftops for people to come back to a more traditional way of living. And that does include cooking whole foods and cooking at home and going outside more and going to bed a little earlier and using less devices and spending intentional times in quiet reflection and taking walks. And truthfully, we're seeing that. We're seeing people get out the board games again and kind of, pick up reading books. And it is exciting. I know that my own life has changed quite a bit, not as much as a lot of people. I already work from home, so I'm not having to learn how to do that. But just having more people home all the time is different for me, and it changes my rhythm a little bit. And I just want to take a few minutes of your time today and talk about ways that you can have a positive impact on the overall reduction of stress in your life as these changes are continuing to take place and unfold really day by day. So since I am a nutritionist, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the role of your gut health and gut inflammation and your stress in the form of anxiety and depression. So we have always been a people who are all in. When industrialization and processed foods came about, we jumped on board. Who wants to have small farms and gardens when you can work less and buy it? The quality wasn't there, but the shelf life in some of those foods is like forever, and how cheap and how just we didn't have to labor for it was just this natural transition. It seems like as humans, we just kind of want to go towards the less of a pain point, I guess that we can say. This is easier. It doesn't take as much effort, and therefore it must be better. And what seemed like something that was cheaper and less effort actually has a high cost, a very high cost, and it has cost a lot of people their lives. Are you afraid of things like cancer? When I was growing up in the 70s, cancer was actually pretty rare. You heard about cancer, but now it seems like it's everywhere. And cancer is a sign of stress and inflammation in the body. Our cells are not dying off the way that they should. And I did talk about that a little bit in my last podcast, so you can go back and listen to that. And I think it might be number 37 or 38, but it's the one right before this one. And it's talking about cellular health. Now, I didn't realize this, but back in 1971, President Nixon signed into law the National Cancer Act. That was actually the year that I was born. I'm 48. Western medicine declared war on cancer. They kind of took this scorched earth strategy, and they decided that they just wanted to absolutely rid the body of this disease, which sounds great, I guess. But scorched earth, not so much. That sounds kind of like absolute devastation. I live in the mountains, and I've seen scorched earth. I have seen the devastation that it causes, and that's what we've been doing by the use of toxic chemicals and deadly radiation and radical surgical interventions. That's what we've been using in this war that we've been waging against cancer cells with increasing force. And if you're interested more in learning about that and what I'm going to talk to you about today, then I encourage you to maybe read The Gut-Brain Connection by Dr. Imran Mayer. I got some of this information that we're going to talk about today from that book. It's pretty science-y, so I just want to kind of warn you on that front. But it really delves deep into what we're going to just talk about on a lighter side or not so deep side and work with some application today. Now, these treatments that we've been using historically for cancer have actually led to an increase in high blood pressure and especially ulcers, among with all the other issues and symptoms that come with being on, say, chemotherapy. So these were handled, like the ulcers, for example, and the high blood pressure were handled with proton pump inhibitors, we know them as PPIs, and beta blockers. The question was really never asked, why is this happening? Here they're doing this scorched earth strategy, and the high blood pressure and the ulcers were definitely a side effect, but rather than looking at why this side effect was happening, what was going on in the body, basically the brain, why was the brain malfunctioning due to these radical environmental treatments in the body, they just covered them up. And really, I don't have to tell you, but PPIs, the proton pump inhibitors, they don't really work well to quell ulcers. They even had to go as far as to cut the vagus nerve, which is like a bundle of nerves that goes from your brain to the gut, and we're going to talk about that today. I don't think they do that vagal nerve surgery very often anymore, but they were doing it on the regular back in the day. So yes, we have come a long way in our medical advances, even since then. But I say, have we really? It still seems like this is the basic landscape of thinking. And another example of this would be the overuse of antibiotics and, of course, prescription painkillers. Oh my goodness. How many people do you know that have been addicted to prescription painkillers? Even over-the-counter daily use of Tylenol, aspirin, or Advil is something that my clients come to me with every single day. And a lot of these medications that used to be prescriptions, we actually now see over the counter. And I'm not a real big conspiracy theorist, but I'll tell you what, it's not really too far afield to blame just the financial end of a lot of these, now it's available to you to buy whenever you want, kind of opportunities. Like, go ahead, you used to need a prescription for something like Prilosec so that your doctor could supervise you being on it. And a lot of these medications were really designed for short-term use. Well, none of that is being monitored when you can just go down to Safeway or Rite Aid or Walmart and get it yourself. And this is even more interesting. Since the 1970s, we have continued to see a rise in heart disease, obesity, and other metabolic disorders and autoimmune disorders such as inflammatory bowel disease and increase of asthma and allergies, and also diseases that involve or affect the developing and aging of the brain, such as autism, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. These are all symptoms or signs that our bodies are burdened or stressed, and we have seen this increase in anxiety. And now, with all of this stuff going on with this deadly virus and the changes to our lives with self-quarantining and worrying about toilet paper and groceries and having a friend stop by and looking at them like, oh my gosh, I'm glad you're here, but I kind of wish you weren't here. Or what are you bringing in? Where have you been? I want to hug you, but I don't want to hug you. All of these stresses are just, I seem like they're just surrounding and swirling around us and our lives. And we may be living longer, but I feel like our quality of life is definitely diminished. I know for me, I think every day, pretty much all day long, I think about my wellness, my mental wellness, my physical wellness, my spiritual wellness. And I do it because I want to live a long time. I want to spend time with my kids and my grandkids and my friends, and I want to do fun things, and I want to see the world. I want to go everywhere. I want to have a passport that is just full of memories. And I have to wonder, back in the day, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago, is that what people were thinking about? Or were a lot of those things just part of living in general? They didn't have to be intentional about it. It was just how you lived choosing your food. I think we've really moved away with all of our wealth and all of our excess. We've moved into this life of treasure. We live greater than kings. And I feel like we've kind of become brats. And you ask us to change anything, and the rebellion or the denial, I mean, we're seeing it. Just yesterday, I was talking with a new friend of mine. Her name is Marianne, and she lives in London. And she's actually a business coach, and we're part of a similar organization for entrepreneurs. And she reached out to me and wanted to chat, and I'm excited that she wants to do an interview with me for her. I'm not sure if she's going to put it on her podcast, or we might be doing like a Facebook Live for her audience. And we're talking about stress, and we're talking about inflammation, and we're talking about things that you can do in this time of all of these limitations. And it was really interesting. Here I am in California, and I'm in a very rural mountain community in California. And thankfully, we have not seen evidence of the coronavirus in our own community, but we are taking precautions to keep it out and to slow the spread if it does get here. Flatten the curve, like everybody else is saying, so that we can spare our medical professionals for those to trickle in with the virus, because we do feel it is coming. We do feel it is coming. People from other areas like the Bay Area and California have vacation homes in their area, and because they're on different lockdowns and their kids are out of school like ours are, they're coming up into our community, a vacation community, and they're bringing with them their own exposures to the virus. And so we have a different attitude, I've noticed, in our community, rather a little blasé, or because we just don't have it down the street. We can't say, oh, my neighbor is in the hospital right now. It was really interesting to hear what they are going with, and she's living in the center of London. And just her level of stress and my level of stress is completely different, and especially for small businesses and entrepreneurs and people that work for businesses that are closed that maybe can't do the telework. I know my husband was home the other day, and he didn't know what the heck to do with himself, and his devices weren't working. So this is what I want to talk to you about these changes and affecting the changes, and that you can actually do things to improve not only your physical health, your environmental health, but your mental health. You are not a victim here. You actually have some things that you can do. And my friend Sean Miner over at the Unstuck podcast, I recommend you go and tune into that. Sean is specifically taking the temperature of our culture and our times, and her podcasts are centered around this mindset and where we need to be to not be overcome by stress and these changes, because some of these changes are actually good for us. We just don't realize that right now because we didn't actually choose them. They're being thrust upon us. So go and visit Sean over on the Unstuck podcast. I listen to her every week, and she's super genuine, and it's going to be good stuff. I just listened to hers yesterday, and it's just great stuff. So this spiral that we are seeing into depression actually happens quicker than you would think when you're faced with a chronic illness or disease. This is something that I dipped my toe in. When you are tired every day because of your chronic pain, and especially when you have been struggling to find answers and nothing is really sticking, or nothing is like turning on a light switch and going, oh, I'm better, it gets depressing. And you kind of self-isolate without even realizing it. And I actually reached out to some of my close friends, and it didn't go well. I just have to tell you, it didn't go well. I don't know why it didn't go well. They weren't interested in helping. Not the entire group, but most of them were not interested in helping and not interested in understanding. I think everybody has a role in their friend groups, and I believe my role is one of being a helper and being somebody that is strong and being somebody that kind of, frankly, has their crap together. And then when I was struggling, I honestly don't think that my closer friends really knew what to do about that, and I really didn't know how to express it. But I have been there, and there is a spiral, and it is very dangerous. Like I said before, chronic pain is very fatiguing, and that fatigue leads to this natural isolation that I'm referring to. An isolation during these times leave you vulnerable to your own thoughts, and those thoughts are often not true, or at the very least, not the whole truth. So as I have said before, just because you feel a certain emotion doesn't make it true, and that is especially true in the times that we are living in right now. So today we are going to talk about your gut and your emotions, and specifically your stress levels. After all, we are self-isolating, not because of depression, hopefully for most of us, but because of this quarantine situation. But we are not alone. Everybody around the world is basically dealing with very similar challenges than we are. So let's keep our mental health sharp, or better yet, let's just make it sharper. So getting to the brass tacks here. Most people by now have heard about the gut-brain axis. I'm sure I don't have to tell you what your brain is. It is common knowledge that your brain is your control center. It is the boss of your nervous system. We learned about this in junior high, that our brain basically runs that nervous system. But did you know that your gut is often referred to as your second brain? I love that. We're going to go over some definitions here. I never want to assume that you know what I'm talking about. I say to my husband on the frequent that maybe an article that I wrote, or a post that I made, or a live video that I did, or a podcast was kind of like skimpy, or like I felt like, oh man, I'm just telling everybody what they already know. And he goes, babe, I have to remind you, this is your wheelhouse. This has taken you years and years to learn and discover. And so remember to always talk to your audience like they are brand new. You never know when somebody's tuning in. So I'm talking to you. This may be old hat to you, and if so, great. Join me in this and the education and sharing this education with other people. But if you're brand new, you're really going to get some good foundational information today. So what is your gut? Well, in the past, the medical world had, and in many ways still has, a very mechanical way of explaining and understanding digestion and the role of the quote-unquote gut. We basically chew our food. Hydrochloric acid starts the digestion in your stomach, so your food can be broken down into smaller pieces and absorbed into the body via the small and large intestines. We sometimes call those bowels, and then eliminate the waste or the portion that couldn't be absorbed and used in the body. So that is true. That is part of the story, but it is definitely not all of the story. We know so much more about this now. So our gut, in most functional circles, and I am a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, that means I want to get to the root of things, and I choose food first, and that I actually have logical and orderly protocols to help rectify, remove, or reduce symptoms. I'm all about functions. So our gut, in these functional circles and how we refer to it and what we're referring to, is pretty much the small and large intestines. But your gut is so much more than just a piece, or a place for nutrient absorption. A huge part of your body's immune system is located here, and believe it or not, your gut plays a major role in your mental health. And this is what we need to be focused on today, our immune system and our mental health, because both are being challenged. Did you know that your gut actually runs its own nervous system? That's why it's the second brain. It's called your enteric nervous system, or your ENS. Let's move on and talk a little bit about hormones. Now, most of my listeners are perimenopausal or menopausal, or you might be somebody that's just like my daughter-in-laws who are in their 20s that want to get this information down so that they don't end up where their moms are. So a lot of us have suffered or are suffering from anxiety or depression. And a lot of us have gut issues, blood sugar issues, hormone issues, inflammation issues. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here. So let's talk a little bit about our happy hormone, serotonin. A lot of people have heard of serotonin and GABA and all these good guys. Serotonin is actually a key neurotransmitter. Now, my doctor, I'm really blessed to have Chris Kresser from the California Center for Functional Medicine as my own functional doctor. So you might be hearing noises around the house. I do have some other people wandering around, so I just ask your apologies and your patience here. But Chris Kresser is a fountain of information. He has a background in acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine. He actually has a school that trains physicians so that they can start using a functional approach. So I use a lot of his information in my own research, and I also love to enjoy studying direct research myself. So this is how Chris Kresser breaks down serotonin and neurotransmitters in general. And he says, and anxiety for that matter, quote unquote, or quote, starting with a quote, approximately 18% of U.S. adults suffer from an anxiety disorder characterized by apprehension and fear that can negatively affect productivity, personal relationships, and overall quality of life. Pharmaceutical treatments such as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, you and I know those as SSRIs, like Prozac, for example, and benzodiazepines manipulate the levels of neurotransmitters in the brain. So that's how they work, and that's what they're for. So although these medications, thank you, Chris, although these medications provide relief for some, they're actually often very ineffective, and they can have serious long-term side effects. So in some cases, these medications are needed and necessary. I am so very thankful that they're there. But truthfully, they were designed for short-term, acute situations, not years and years of use. I always kind of, gasp, I guess you could say, when I hear that somebody has been on these neurotransmitter modifying medications for 10, 12, 15 years. It's absolutely amazing to me. The low-level drug addiction really does affect our bodies. There is no free ride when it comes to taking any prescription or chemical for that matter. The benefit must outweigh the risk, and for some it does, but I have to question the long-term or the forever use. It really makes me want to ask the question, but what is at the root of this? Can we work on maybe improving our own serotonin cellular uptake naturally? Yeah, we can. Did you know that there is 400 times more serotonin produced in your gut than in the brain? Excuse me, I'm going to grab a drink of water. I know, I'm so silly with my podcast. I'm just a real person. I'm just sharing with you just like girlfriends share, and sometimes a girlfriend needs a drink of water. So let me repeat what I said. 400 times more serotonin is produced in the gut than in the brain. So if you would like more of that happy hormone balance, it just makes sense to take care of your gut. But our guts are stressed, especially now. We are stressed, especially now. There's a lot of changes that people are making. There's a lot of bored eating, a lot of stressed eating, a lot of convenience, quick eating, and we're going to talk about that today. So when I say stress, I don't know what you picture, but this is what I picture. There are actually 3 kinds of stress: environmental, physical, and emotional. Like I've shared in past podcasts, we are living in the most stressful, all-inclusive word here, stressful time since our existence as humans. Our bodies and our minds are frankly just stressed out, more so than ever before. We stay up late, we sleep poorly, we are addicted to exogenous or outside of our body stimulants like coffee and sugar, and even myself, I find myself even craving just more and more podcasts and input. We eat toxic, chemicalized, frankenfoods. I stole that word frankenfoods foods from Dr. Mark Hyman. It's exactly what it is. It's bits and pieces of foods put together with chemicals, and we've gotten accustomed to this. But just because we're accustomed to something doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for us. We exercise too much, or we don't exercise enough. We consume exogenous or outside downers like alcohol to calm us down in the evening. I was recently looking at at Instagram. I was kind of scrolling through, and somebody threw the question out there and said, "Can anybody teach me how to de-stress without wine?" Wine can calm down or stifle the neurotransmitters that are overactive, maybe like the pain transmitters, for example, or the anxiety transmitters, but they're just a band-aid. They're not really helping. And I'll tell you, the daily consumption of alcohol to make you feel that hot, fudgy, relaxed feeling in the evening so that you can wind down and go to bed is temporary. It actually drastically affects your blood sugar, and it might help you go to sleep eventually, but usually between 12 and 1, it's going to wake you back up again because your blood sugar is going to drop too low, and then your cortisol is going to spike. But the long and the short of it is that we are stressed out. We like shortcuts, and we like everything right now. So what are we going to do about it? Well, lots of research over the last 10 years especially has been pointing to the gut-brain connection as it relates to stress and anxiety and depression. If our brains are feeling a mental stress and we choose unhealthy, toxic foods, then we're just bolstering that stress response from both ends. Couple that with what I mentioned a second ago, the poor sleep, too much or too little exercise, and the use of toxic products all around us, and we can easily see why things like cancer and mental health issues and autoimmune diseases, because of this constant, rampant inflammation, is just coursing through our lives, through and through. Next question. How is most anxiety and or depression treated in the conventional medical world? Pills, at home, booze, or other forms of escapism like vacations or video gaming or watching movie after movie or whatever. Even good things like listening to an educational podcast like this can be a form of escapism if you never really put it to use, never take a break from it, never consider it in the private vaults of your mind, never take a walk and just think about it, right? Even good things can be turned into bad things when they aren't handled responsively. Most people don't wait and save, do they, when they go on a vacation? They just want to go right now. They want to put it on credit, but they do pay later. And all of these methods of escapism or covering things up with pills or booze, there's going to be a payment later, and in more ways than I can tell you. And a lot of people come home from these vacations exhausted or not really refreshed. Did you ever take a break from work maybe and go sit outside to get some sunshine and just stay on your phone and scroll away, and you go back into work after your 10 or 15 minute break and you don't feel refreshed? That's because you didn't really take a break. The real answer for lowering stress and for taking a break actually lies in diet and lifestyle changes, my friend. We need to remove the toxic influences of processed and chemicalized frankenfoods. We need to learn to say no to some of the things that we are invited to do or can do. We need to be okay with missing out on somebody's latest post or latest podcast or latest movie or whatever it is. We need to learn to live within our means. I think a lot of us are figuring that out now. I think a lot of us are because their restaurants are closed, the events or the social opportunities that we are used to engaging in are no longer available or encouraged. And we're realizing how much money that we have been spending on those things. My husband and I usually don't eat out during the week. especially with my eating style and my needs for wellness. Eating out usually isn't conducive to that, especially on a regular basis. But in an effort to save money, we've put, even before this, about 95% of that on hiatus. And it's amazing how much money you save. So that's actually something for the plus column or the positive column with all of these things that are going on right now. Another thing that we need to do to find that answer is why it's called diet and lifestyle, is to find the appropriateness of movement. We need to honor our age, and we need to honor the season that we are in. And when you have physical, emotional, or environmental stresses pouring down on you, the last thing you need to do is go take an 18-mile run. This is not time to train for a marathon. This is not time to do insane WODs in your CrossFit gym, and you're really not fighting stress. You're not combating stress. You're better off during these times to slow down and do intentional movement like meditation and prayer. And I'm going to put on a Tai Chi YouTube video today, or Qigong or something like that. I did my yoga this morning, but I definitely have making extra opportunities throughout the day to go outside in nature during times where my normal work days I wouldn't do, like when it's raining. I would wait until it stopped raining, or I would just choose to maybe walk on my treadmill or do something else. But I've been intentionally going out in nature and unplugged. I'm not listening to my iPod. I'm not listening to music, which would be a better choice than learning or news or anything. But I'm doing it as a form of meditation and movement. I'm also, as always, making sure that I take care of my gut, and I want to encourage you to do some of those things as well. Let's talk about what some common triggers of anxiety are. So there are a few emotional and cognitive disorders, that are not linked to the gut. I meant to say that there are very few emotional and cognitive disorders that are not linked to your gut. And we do actually have some triggers that we have identified in science and research, and we're going to talk about those today. But since you are your very best health advocate, it's not always about going to the doctor, but there are times that a functional medical doctor especially is going to help you rule out some things that you might not even know exists in your body. This is why I have my own functional medical doctor. We need to rule out things like SIBO and parasites and fungal overgrowth. Some of us have heard about like candida going crazy, infections, inflammation. This is where a functional medical professional really shines. You might be doing everything right, but that might not kill the parasites. That might not handle the SIBO or an infection that you have. So whenever I work with a client for at least 3 months, I love a 3-month time. You can see me on a one-shot basis, one and done, I call them, but it just isn't as effective. I really like 3 months. I have a package that is pretty popular that people see me 6 times in 3 months. In the very beginning, you might see me a little bit more, but then we like space them out. Why? Because a lot of people, there's a lot of progress that happens in that time frame, a lot of diet and lifestyle changes, and a lot of symptoms are eliminated or reduced, weight is lost, sleep is found, blood sugar regulation happens, the cravings are gone, the headaches are gone, maybe their skin clears up, energy, there's a lot of good stuff that can happen in 3 months. But sometimes we see that there's these little things just hanging on and we feel like we hit a wall. And that's when I encourage them to go down and get some of these tests that I mentioned for SIBO and parasites and whatnot done by a functional medical doctor. And yeah, you can go to your primary, but to be honest, they just don't use as comprehensive tests as we can. The test choices are typically based off of what their insurance companies want to cover and what they're basically familiar with themselves. And functional medical doctors are going to use a whole systems approach, your whole body, mind, spirit, and soul, as well as how all the systems function together. In Western medicine, it's very departmentalized, right? Like if you have a skin problem, you go to a dermatologist and he's going to be more comfortable with his testing, so to speak. And we get a lot of this one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing, to the point where we have had to come up with checks and balances systems at the pharmaceutical level because people are going to a variety of doctors and taking medications that are issues when you're taking them at the same time. So another thing I want to say about when you go to a typical conventional medical doctor, your primary care physician, is they may have a test for SIBO, but it might not be the best test. For example, our youngest son was having stomach problems a year ago, and his pediatrician ordered a SIBO test, and I took him down to do it, and he just took a completely inferior test to what I took with my functional medical doctor a year later. Why? Because it's cheaper. It's just cheaper. That's what the insurance companies are going to want to work with. And frankly, most primary care docs, they're not looking for root causes. They just really wanted to ease his stomach pain, and they felt that they wanted to rule that out, and that was it. But it was an inferior test. It didn't give the whole picture. So we kind of had to do some stuff at home with supplements and different things to get him going and clear his way. And he did make his way through it, but it's really frustrating. And there's still a price tag to it. Now, let's also talk a little bit about your HPA axis. Now, we need to know more about your overall stress response and your stress tolerance. Chronic stress today, more than ever, is a real problem. Chronic just means unrelenting, anything that is happening for greater than 6 weeks. Our bodies are not designed to be chronically stressed. The wear and tear that shows up because of chronic stress looks like inflammation. It looks like illness and disease, and some of the early warning signs are often anxiety and depression, and you guessed it, gut issues. Now, your HPA axis actually stands for your hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal relationship. Those are all glands, endocrine glands in the body. This axis manages your stress response. But since your adrenals are also part of your HPPAA axis, I'll break that down: hypothalamus, pituitary, pancreas, adrenal, and adipose, or your fat tissue, blood sugar is also something to consider. So your adrenals are designed to bail you out of low or too low blood sugar. So we've got our adrenals working double time. On one hand, they are helping us out with our flight or fight response, which is now elevated for a lot of us and becoming chronic. But also our adrenals are working with helping to balance our blood sugar, which is going wonky, especially if you're in the perimenopause years, where we're having estrogen and progesterone changes in our body. There's just this crazy circus level of events that are going on. And one of the first things that I do with my patients is to get their blood sugar regulated. This immediately helps lower their stress level in the fight or flight department, and it brings down their level of anxiety, and it starts bringing people up out of those feelings of depression, and it gives them better energy and improved sleep, and they're not reaching for snacks all the time. It really is amazing to watch the light return to these people's eyes. It's just absolutely amazing. I'm working with a gal right now. We've worked together in the past in a small group format to where she took my blood sugar detox course called Restart. And she reached out to me just recently and said, I need to work with you one-on-one. I'm going through a lot of different changes in my life. And we've only met once a week for the last couple weeks. She is an insulin-dependent diabetic. Her daily blood sugar levels just in a couple weeks are incredibly low. She's having to test low for a diabetic. She's having to test more frequently because we are starting to regulate her blood sugar. She's feeling great, and I just love to hear that. It's just watching watching her like blossom is just why I do what I do. And sure, she's had an 8-pound weight loss. That's amazing. And us women, we need those wins. We need to feel it in our clothes and see it in the mirror. But she isn't having those cravings that drove her before, and her anxiety is better. And it's especially important for her to lower those diabetic blood sugar levels because she knows more than anyone the long-term frightening trail that diabetes leads to, even if you are doing what your doctors say and trying to balance your blood sugar by using the injectable insulin. So DHA, cortisol, and pregnenolone are pretty hefty hormones, and they are all involved in chronic stress. And when they are turned on too much and too often, they affect the production of our other hormones. And in a lot of cases, that's pregnenolone. And I did do a podcast talking about that in the pregnenolone steal. It is the podcast talking about cortisol and thyroid and gosh, I can't remember what other was in there, but you can see that. It's 2 or 3 podcasts ago on hormones. So these triggers that I've been talking about, there's actually 4 of them to look for, and I'm going to list them out. The first one would be perceived stress. The second one is inflammation. Next would be blood sugar dysregulation. And last would be circadian rhythm. So let's break down what perceived stress is. Basically, what I'm saying is what is stressful to you may not be stressful to me. And in fact, some people really thrive under pressure. And the important thing to remember is that stress is just very individualized. I always go to the extreme here. I think of soldiers. I think of law enforcement and firefighters and emergency room physicians and nurses and staff. I think about those people that they are designed for it and they can help you in these high crisis situations, and they can keep doing this day after day, year after year. And you're like, I don't even know how you do that. That is because of perceived stress. Now, this is where it's really important to work on mindset. And Sean Miner's podcast, the Unstuck podcast, is something that you're going to want to take a listen to. Mindset work comes into play when we have certain factors that we can't change. When maybe I'm not the firefighter, right? A lot of people know, yeah, I've always known I wanted to be a firefighter. I've always wanted to do that, right? Well, what if it's not something like that you feel like you are gifted for or purposed to or for? Like, let's just say you don't enjoy your job, but you can't quit. You know, you need the money and you don't have anything else lined up. Working on your mindset while you begin figuring out an employment alternative can actually help lower this stress level. So that is a stress that I'm sure all of us can agree would be damaging on the long-term level. Or like in my own case, I have an autoimmune disease. Rather than wallow in the fact that it happened, why did it happen? Why did it happen to me? You know, I can flip it around and harness this newfound discovery and learn how to live with it the best I can. I can change my perception of my stress, and I can own it, and I can actually use it in a positive way. So perceived stress is one of the first triggers for anxiety. Another trigger is inflammation. Almost all of my clients start by cleaning up their diet, just like I did with my newest client that I was talking about. But we get to, when we're working on a one-on-one basis, we get to fine-tune along the way. And for most people, you know, we end up ruling out different foods that cause inflammation in the body. That may look like dairy. It almost always looks like gluten or soy. Or if you have an inflammatory arthritis situation, it's definitely going to include nightshades. But it's an evolution, and it's a discovery time, and it's different for everyone. So figuring out the best eating style for you will definitely reduce your gut inflammation, and that will have direct effects on your mental health. So These anxiety triggers are in your hand. You don't have to pull them. You can reduce this gut inflammation. Inflammation is what scientists are now looking at the root of heart disease. That's one of our top killers here in America. And inflammation isn't always food, by the way. We also need to look at movement. Too much or too little can be inflammatory on the body. Sleep. Too much or too little can be inflammatory on the body, especially quality sleep. And that's going to segue me into talking about your circadian rhythm. That is your clock in your body that not only ages you, but also tells you when it's time to go to bed and when it's time to wake up. And sadly, most people are sleep deprived these days. I would bet my Mac that I'm using right now that even though there's a lot of people that are staying home, that they're not getting better sleep because of the elevated stress levels and the wonky hours and changing of all that they know, that their circadian rhythm has not improved, that it's gotten worse. So this is one of the triggers for anxiety that we want and depression that we want to look at. Little things like artificial lighting has changed our world. We no longer go to bed and wake up with the sun and have candles and everything around, right? We stay up way beyond what our bodies are designed for. Couple that with what we're doing when we stay up too late. We're staring at screens, those blue lights that we keep hearing about, and blue light blocking glasses. The blue lights in these digital screens actually keep our brains buzzing and very active. Now, the glasses that I have and my husband have actual blue light blockers built right into it. We have progressive lenses like most people our age have, so we can see far and close and super close, and there's this nice gentle transition. But it is really nice that we have the blue light blocking lenses, but you can go and purchase blue light blockers. There's a variety of brands now. They're not $300. You can even find them, I think, for $20. They may not be as cute, but you can still take advantage of what they actually do. You can also just turn off your devices, an hour before you go to bed. And these people that have these buzzing brains, they often find that they're waking up every 2 or 3 hours a night. Sometimes it's a blood sugar issue. A lot of times cortisol is the issue. And that's one of our triggers, is when this rhythm is off. It's a perfect trigger for anxiety and depression. And the last one I actually just mentioned, which was blood sugar regulation. And we already talked quite a bit about earlier, but just so that we stay focused on that, we need to get this right. And if you don't get this right, you are heading into inflammatory diseases, and that includes things such as diabetes and Alzheimer's. So I'm going to say those 4 triggers again: perceived stress, inflammation, blood sugar dysregulation, and circadian rhythm. If you would like to reduce your stress right now, we're all going through this, those are the 4 areas that I want you to look at. And sometimes you can actually, or in some ways, you can get stress testing done. And you'll find a lot of these tests available in the protocols to get you straightened up when you're working with a functional medical doctor. The most comprehensive tests at this moment in time are the Dutch test, which includes dried urine, also saliva, which tests your cortisol awakening response, also organic acids, as well as making sure that you do a full and comprehensive hormone panel. We don't just want to exclusively look at hormones that are bound, but the whole picture, which includes your receptivity as well as your ability to detox used up hormones. One thing to remember is that obese people have way too much circulating hormones, especially estrogen, and it gets stored as fat cells, and it's just constantly being excreted into the body, constant production. And it's a big problem, and it kind of keeps you gaining weight because estrogen actually encourages fat storage. Now, what kind of nutrient deficiencies could cause or exacerbate stress-induced anxiety and depression? I mean, I am a nutritional therapy practitioner. When I look at food, I look at nutrients. I really do. So some of the nutrient deficiencies have some commonality or have some major sway when it comes to anxiety and depression. In other words, if somebody has anxiety or depression, these are the most common nutrient deficiencies. That's a better way to say it. B12, vitamin D, riboflavin, folate, zinc, copper, EPA, DHA, choline, B6, and B2 are all found to be common nutrient deficiencies in people, especially with anxiety. I took a picture. I take a lot of pictures of my food and explain why I eat what I am eating. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt to make a meal and stop and take a picture of it or whatever. But the feedback that I get from people on the regular is that it gives them great ideas, especially when you are culturally used to eating certain kinds of food. You kind of rule out, well, what else can I eat? If I can't have a bagel in the morning, what else can I eat? If I can't have a breakfast wrap in the morning, what else can't I eat? If eggs aren't working for me, what are the other breakfast foods that are out there? If I'm not doing grains and I'm used to having a bowl of oatmeal, what the heck? If I'm not doing dairy right now, I always have Greek yogurt. What the heck? What can I eat? So I take pictures of my food because I want to show what nutrient-dense foods look like and how you can break the rules and have them. You can have broccoli in the morning. You can have fish in the morning, right? So nutrient deficiency is a biggie, and B12 is a big one for especially perimenopause women. A lot of women still, even at my age and older, are taking hormonal birth control, for example. And a lot of the vitamins and minerals that I just mentioned are naturally depleted when you take a hormonal birth control. So if you're not going to get off the hormonal birth controls, then what I recommend is making sure that, number one, you are consuming foods that are rich with nutrients to try and fill the gaps, but also maybe supplementing. A lot of times it means supplementing. And when I choose supplements, I always try and go food first. And in the case of B12, nutritional yeast is a great example of that. Honestly, it looks like fish food, looks like goldfish flakes, and it tastes rather nutty and cheesy. It's got a very cheddary flavor to it, like a very mild cheddar. They're little dry little flakes, and you can put them all over your food, and it gives you a whopping dose of B12. So if fatigue is something that you're battling with, then that is a little trick in my bag, and I put it on my food almost every morning. It's really bioavailable, meaning your body can absorb it really well. And it's delicious. I have a couple friends. My friend Annie comes over here and she just loves it. And our daughter-in-law Alex, when there is nutritional yeast sprinkled on our foods. Now, some people like myself are very sensitive and responsive to it. So I don't usually have it for dinner because it's so good and effective that it'll actually keep me awake a little bit. So back to this hormonal birth control and the nutrient deficiencies. One of the reasons why women who are taking hormonal birth controls, one of the reasons why anxiety is associated with birth control is because of that list of vitamins and minerals, right? So you can see the correlations here. But all this freedom that hormonal birth control was supposed to give us has really only brought us misery and anxiety and depression and weight gain and affecting our blood sugar and our mental health in a lot of ways. And if you're somebody who is on hormonal birth control, regardless of what your age is, whether you are looking to stay on it or get off of it, I highly recommend you looking at Dr. Jolene Brighton. And she actually has a book on the pill itself, but she talks specifically about protocols. And I use her protocols along with some other ones from like Dr. Sarah Gottfried with my clients that are on or getting off of or who are having a lot of hormone issues. I use a lot of their protocols, and it's really important to know not only what you're dealing with now and what your food is, but where you want to go. And if where you want to go is off of hormonal birth control, then those are some great resources. And that might be a good step for you, especially with these times of additional stress, knowing that there's something that you're doing in your lifestyle that is actually piling on to that extra stress. Let's move on and talk a little bit about methylation. This can be a rather confusing topic, but methylation is crucial for neurotransmitter production. Remember, we talked about one, for example, is serotonin. You need to be a good methylator. So let me use my own doctor, Chris Kresser, again, and use his explanation because he just truly says it so well. So I'm going to read it here. Methylation is a vital metabolic process that happens in every cell and every organ of our body. Life would simply not exist without it. It takes place in more than 1 billion times per second in the body. So that should give you some idea of how important methylation is. Anything that's happening 1 billion times per second is probably crucial to our survival and well-being. It happens when one molecule passes a methyl group, which is a carbon atom linked to 3 hydrogens, to another molecule. So it's a pretty basic biochemical process. These reactions that occur when one molecule passes a methyl group to another make things like creatine, carnitine, CoQ10, phosphatidylcholine, melatonin, and serotonin, and tons of other really important substances in the body. Thank you, Chris. So basically what we've learned from that is that we need our bodies to properly methylate in order to not be stressed out. And did you notice the mention of melatonin, the sleepy hormone, or CoQ10, the brain health supplement so many people take, but they don't necessarily know why they're taking them? Like they take melatonin to sleep, they don't know why it helps. Well, maybe they have methylation issues. So I'm not saying if you have sleep issues to not take melatonin or to try that out on the temporary, but I am saying, maybe you should look at improving your methylation process so that you won't have to depend on an exogenous or outside source of melatonin. Just saying. So now we're back into my wheelhouse here. What is a diet that would support healthy methylation? It's easy, but not so easy for everybody. It's because shellfish and organ meat are the big players here. You know, I love shellfish, and so I have no issue eating oysters or clams throughout my week. As a matter of fact, when our 2 oldest sons, especially my oldest son, comes over like he did last night for his 26th birthday, we are doing quarantining, but of course we're going to open our home to our sons and our daughter-in-laws and grandsons. They are quarantining as well, so we're kind of trying to stay safe, and everybody's been healthy. But as soon as he walked in the door, I cracked open those smoked clams, and we shared them. So one of the things that I just recently learned when I was doing the research for this podcast is that one serving of oysters is like a whole week's worth of copper. It's pretty cool, pretty cool. So the organ meat, this is a tough one. Actually, liver is the best source of folate, and which is definitely a deficit for people that are on hormonal birth control, and also B12. So liver, that's a rough one. And you may not know this, but I only recently started eating beef. I never liked it growing up, and it always would make me gag. I wanted to eat it like it smelled good on the barbecue, especially if it was tri-tip or whatever. It just smelled great, but as soon as I get it into my mouth, my gag reflex would just go. But it wasn't until I tried grass-fed, grass-finished, pasture-raised beef that I liked it. And it does taste different. It really does taste different. No, it doesn't taste like chicken or something that different, but whatever quality is in the conventionally raised meats, especially the grains, just didn't work with me. And so I'm grateful for that because I had a whole lifetime of not being exposed to all the crap that they give those cows. And I didn't partake in the cruel treatment and those horrific lives that they were leading either. We have friends that are ranchers, and those cows live great lives, and their sacrifice is well appreciated, and they are delicious, I gotta say. So it is healthy and wise to eat a variety of protein, and that's why I'm glad that I can do the pork and the fish and the chicken and the beef and the oysters and whatever, because there really are negative consequences for the people who only eat chicken. For a long, long time, we ate so much white meat chicken, and for a lot of people, we just thought that that was actually the healthiest options. But chickens are higher in omega 6s, and we need our omega 3 to omega 6 ratio to be about 1 to 1. And not just talking about chicken here, but just processed foods in general, and people that consume processed foods, and that includes your salad dressings and your condiments, I have to say, and some of the other Franken foods, like, of course, macaroni and cheese and these breads. That's a processed food, and pastas and whatever. Typically, that 1 to 1 ratio of omega 3s to omega 6s looks more like a 20 to 1. And that is an issue for cancer. And if you dial it back, inflammation, that is a stress on the body, and that's what we're talking about today. So we need to be brave. We need to be brave, right? We need to get past our cultural familiarities, and we need to look at what people have been doing for thousands of years, and that is eating things like organ meats and offal. I'm sorry, but it's just the truth. This is some of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. So what I did is I went to unboundwellness.com, and my colleague Michelle Hooper, who is also a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, and she is a food blogger, and her recipes are typically going to be the autoimmune paleo style recipes, which she's really great at creating. She has Hashimoto's thyroiditis and has changed her life. And she's really young. She's still having babies, and she's really fun for me to follow. And she reminds me a lot of my daughter-in-laws, just with her energy. And she has a great recipe for a liver pate, and I made it, and I can get it down. I don't crave it, so to speak, and I just kind of have to make myself eat it. But I know that I'm doing something that is really good and nourishing for my body. I recently got it out of the freezer, and I cut stuff up, and I said, okay, I need to get back in the habit of doing this again. And I put it in my mouth and realized what I just ate was some cookie dough. It wasn't the liver pate that I was expecting. And so, but my mind was set on liking it. And I'm like, this is cinnamony. What is going on? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a cookie dough recipe I made a while ago. So I'm going to have to go back into my freezer and make sure that I actually get my pate out today. But basically, a diet that supports proper methylation is going to include a variety of animal fats and proteins, sea vegetables, nuts and seeds, if you can tolerate them, and low sugar seasonal fruit. I always say go for the limes and the lemons and the berries, and non-starchy seasonal veggies. Like today, I had sweet potato. Root vegetables are still in where I'm living. The sea vegetables for their iron, and the healthy animal fats to help you get that vitamin A, D, E, and K, those fat-soluble vitamins into the cells where you need them. So if you feel like you might have impaired methylation, like you're somebody that requires, for example, melatonin to sleep, then I would try and add the organ meats and shellfish into your diet once a week. You can do it. Now, what are some other things that you can do? Maybe some alternative things you can do to improve your gut-brain axis, because that's what we've been talking about this whole time. We've been talking about hormones that affect your brain and gut, and foods that affect your brain and gut, and nutrients that affect your brain and gut, and lifestyle choices that affect your brain and gut. But what else is there? Well, CBD. I am a big proponent of CBD. Cannabidiol is the non-psychoactive property of the cannabis plant expressly. We are finding CBD all over. You don't get high when you use a CBD, and I actually make my own. So I use fat to deliver it, which means I make my own CBD oil, and I take it in the morning and I take it in the night. There are manufacturers that also have like water delivery. Those tend to be very bioavailable, especially if you have liver gallbladder issues and maybe aren't eating enough leafy greens. You may not be metabolizing fat as well. You might want to look at one of those brands, but there's plenty to choose from. I actually started, my first CBD oil was with Charlotte's Web, but there's a lot of them out there. Lazarus is another one, and I can't even name all the good ones, and kind of went off the research a little bit. I've been out of the loop since I make my own. You can also look at adding taurine to your daily supplementing. I do take a taurine supplement. This is an amino acid, and it's a precursor to GABA. I mentioned GABA earlier. And the recommendations as far as dosage when you're going to take something like taurine is going to be 500 milligrams to 3 grams. And as always, start low in your dose and go slow. Give it a little bit of time before you increase your dose. Not only is it going to save you money, but then you really only want to use as much as your body needs. And that might not be exactly what's on the label. So start low. Around 500 milligrams is typical, and going up to 3 grams, 3 grams per day is fine. Another helpful amino acid would be L-theanine, and this is found in green tea. Now, L-theanine can actually have a calming effect, which is super interesting. So it does this by decreasing your beta brain waves, and it does leave you alert but calm. So that sounds great to me. I'm actually getting ready to have some green tea or maybe some of my homemade bone broth when I get finished doing this, because oddly enough, this can be stressful for me. I just want to make sure that I'm getting all the information out to you and I'm doing it well. I try and do it in a relaxed, casual atmosphere and not, like scripted. I always just have my points that I want to make, but I want to be clear and I want to speak slowly. And that's hard for me to do, is speaking slowly. And I'm a rather energetic kind of gal. And so I'm definitely always prepared after I do this to help my body out a little bit by having some bone broth, or maybe today, as I remind myself of the green tea, maybe I'll have some green tea. Or I also like rasa, which is the next one I'm going to talk about, which these are adaptogenic herbs. There's all kinds of research that has gone in recently into adaptogenic herbs and different mushrooms, and you can look into companies like Rasa, R-A-S-A. I believe their handle is We Are Rasa on Instagram, and they're really, really great. You can read her story is awesome, and I faithfully start my day every day with Rasa. I gave up caffeine. Caffeine is rough, the coffee, on our adrenals. There are some healthy benefits when you're speaking about coffee and some of the polyphenols, but the caffeine, the benefit wasn't worth the price for me. So I switched to Rasa, and I really, really like it. So you can check that out. There's also other companies like Four Sigmatic, that is FOURSIGMATIC, Four Sigmatic, and those are even at our local health food store. So you have to check that out. I know people are doing a lot of ordering right now. So one brand when you're looking at L-theanine, and I have to admit I haven't tried this myself, but this is one that my own doctor recommends, Chris Kresser, and the company I believe is called Sun-theanine. That's Suntheanine, Sun-theanine, yeah. It's a good brand, and the recommended dosage is 200 to 4 milligrams per day, split between AM and PM. So again, start slow. So maybe 100 milligrams in the morning and 100 milligrams in the evening, and work your way up if you feel like you need more. So I hope this helped you today. I hope this blessed you and you learned some things about stress, namely anxiety and depression, and your gut health and how they are related. And one thing I want to leave you with is that there is that nerve, that vagus nerve. It actually communicates from not only your brain to your gut, but from your gut back to your brain. And there's little massages that you can do, like a vagal nerve massage, that can actually help. And my friend, Dr. Dr. Perry Nicholson was on my podcast a while back, and he actually talks about that a little bit. So that can be very helpful and very therapeutic. And there's other things that I do to help my body detoxify, like dry brushing for sure, and also lymphatic massage. And you can find information on that on my podcast with Dr. Perry Nicholson, and he is from Stop Chasing Pain. And you can even see it on my YouTube. You can watch the interview if you'd like. I've known Perry for a long time, and you can see him on there, and he's a real great guy. And that's on my YouTube channel, which is the Path for Health Nutritional Therapy. So thank you for listening today, and I hope you stay well and you stay self-quarantined, and that you take care of those diet and lifestyle changes that can be so very, very powerful and lower your anxiety and get you out of depression. Thanks for listening. I'll see you on the Path for Health. Well, I certainly hope that you found that last and my latest podcast on anxiety and stress and inflammation and the gut-brain axis helpful. I want to encourage you to try and be social in areas that really matter. And I know I just walked in from a nice outdoor walk. We live in the mountains. There's so many pretty things to see and fresh air to smell, and running into neighbors that were out walking. And that really, really helps with my own mental health. I made sure to be outside for at least a half an hour, even though it's a little drizzly, kind of a little sleighing, little snow, little rain, kind of action going on. But try and be social in a safe way, in that distance, that social distance, which was just great out in the fresh air. Another way to get a little bit of community is by joining my closed Facebook group called Is This Hormones or Autoimmunity? It's a group of just under 100 women. Most of them are perimenopausal or menopausal, and it's a great community. We talk daily. I'm on there every single day, giving tips and insights and words of encouragement and running little challenges. Today is March 25th, if you are listening to this right when it comes out, but getting started on Friday, I'm running a 7-day challenge that you might be interested in. It's only for women that are in the Facebook group. So you can go to me directly on Facebook to find the group, or you can search for it yourself on Is This Hormones or Autoimmunity? And we're running a 7-day challenge. It's nothing to add any additional stress or crazy strict protocols to your life, which is what nobody really needs right now. But if you're looking to reduce your stress and take advantage of this slowdown, then this might be a fun, educational, yet a little bit lighthearted challenge for you. And it's with a bunch of women, probably a lot like yourself. It's 7 days. It starts on Friday. I won't be accepting anybody into the challenge after it begins. It's free, and you do need to be a part of our group to enjoy the challenge. Every day you'll receive an email from me, a challenge that you'll be focused on just for that one day, and you could decide whether or not you want to stack up those challenges for all 7 days, or if you just want to adopt the single challenge for the day. But I think you'll really enjoy it, and you'll learn a little bit along the way. So join us over in the Facebook group, and you can get started. And I don't know, it's a little bit of community. I know it's not face-to-face community, but it is nice and fun. All right, see you there.